For this episode of Coffee with Closers, I'm sitting down with Gina DeLapa, the best-selling author of multiple books, including Thriving at Work. She serves as the president of Thriving Cultures, a company that specializes in helping organizations develop a strong culture. Gina is an expert in all things company culture and leadership development. Stay tuned for my conversation with Gina, where she shares practical insights on how to grow as a leader and how to build a strong company culture.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Coffee with Closers, where business leaders share insights on how to build businesses from the ground up and best practices for innovating in their industry.
Hey Gina, I'm super excited to have you join me for this episode of Coffee with Closers.
Hey, thank you, Samuel. It's great to be here.
Oh yeah, I've been looking forward to this discussion. You are an expert on culture and building, an amazing company culture. So certainly want to get into that discussion. But every entrepreneur that I ever had on the show had an amazing story of how they overcame obstacles to become an entrepreneur. I'm sure you have something very similar to tell. So can you tell our audience a little bit about your journey of becoming an entrepreneur?
Sure. Well, I didn't set out, Samuel, to be an entrepreneur. And sometimes I look back and go, maybe that's how I know it was meant to be. I had a job I was good at and I loved, working at a university as a career counselor. So I'll take you back to the spring of 2007. I had the best performance review of my life. I mean, it sounded like my mother wrote it, but there were only two problems. There were two things I really wanted to do for the department I worked in, and my boss politely shot them down right away. And it was kind of a bummer. And I knew he liked me and respected me and vice versa. But I remember saying to him, I understand that these dreams might not fit in here, but these dreams might not go away. And I was surprised to hear myself say that, because that's something kind of an entrepreneur, typical kind of mindset, that you've got an idea that it won't let you go. And so, yeah, sure enough, a few months later, I gave my 30-day notice, 4 weeks, whatever it was that they had asked for, left on very good terms. I actually ended up doing some work for them when I left, but I went out on my own. And I think the big obstacle that I had overcome even prior to that, I had lost someone very close to me a few months before. Somebody, it's my childhood best friend, and it was kind of a pivotal moment, and it woke me up and made me think, whatever you're going to do with your life, get on with it now. Don't wait. So maybe someone in our audience can hear that and say, yeah, that sounds like me. Take what happens to you, and there's a saying, don't waste a good crisis.
So true. And obviously that wasn't the only experience you had with entrepreneurial life, right?
No,
you grew up in a home that encouraged you. So you want to share a little bit about how that upbringing may have had some impact on you turning into an entrepreneur? Yeah,
and in a way, it kind of had everything to do with that. I almost forget about it because it's just sort of part of in my bloodstream. But yes, I was born into a family of entrepreneurs. My parents had started a pizza business in the family garage before I was born. And by the time I was 10 years old, I was informally on the payroll, summer after fourth grade, just doing very menial work for 50 cents an hour. But my first paycheck was, I think, $3.50, and I was over the moon because I had power, I could earn my own money. And it wasn't so glamorous. Christmas vacation in fifth grade, when my parents, the day after Christmas, are hauling me out of bed and saying, you got to go to work. Like, yesterday we were opening presents, and now, so, but they've been entrepreneurs for my whole life. My dad is still very much of that mindset. He's always got a project going. And so working in the family business, hearing every night at the dinner table about who did what and all the dramas and ups and downs inherent in a business was very much a part of my upbringing and ethos and education. So, so going out on my own did not feel foreign, and it really wasn't even the first time I had gone out on my own, but it was the first time I'd gone out in this new direction. So, yeah.
You're giving me some ideas, because my oldest is 4 years old. He's 8 years old, and he's going to be going into fourth grade. So I can probably start to put him to work.
You can. And I'll tell you something, Samuel. His future employers will love you for that, because I've talked to a lot of employers who say, I want to know what age did they start working. Now, 8 or 10 is a little over the top, but 16 for sure.
Yeah. I don't know if $3.50 you will. I think that would be a hard negotiation with him, though. He's learning a lot about money, so we'll have to see how that negotiation goes.
Yeah, I'd be the first to come to his aid if you wanted to pay him that amount. But I still tease my parents about that. But it all worked out, so no complaints.
You've had a lot of that experience, and you went down to write 3 books. You're a business consultant. You coach people on their personal journey to leadership. There's all sorts of things you've accomplished over the years. From all the things that you accomplished in your career, what's the one thing you're super proud of?
The one thing I guess I'm super proud of is that I decidedly put my career on a different track back around 2001. I'd just written another book, which I don't count in the 3, but it really was the first one. It was called 401k Success Stories. And the concept was great, and I can say that because it wasn't my idea. It was actually a former employer that had me write this book, and that they published it, chronicling people's ordinary stories of 401k. But I realized I don't want to write about personal finance the rest of my life. I was good at it. I had a steady stream of freelance work, a lot of repeat business, but my heart just wasn't in it. And so I moved from Michigan to the West Coast, which in an entrepreneurial Midwestern family, at strike 1, to go to grad school, strike 2, to study counseling. Like, all right, now we just know you're off the deep end. I mean, it wasn't said to me, but it was a little bit of an exotic move, and there was no guarantee of success or what if I just went back to doing what I was doing before. There was, and my second day of grad school was 9/11, the 9/11, and it was kind of tough, scary. I was sleeping on an air mattress at that point. I hadn't gotten my real furniture, and I do have family in San Diego where I live, so that helped tremendously, still does. But that was a big risk, and I count it as the thing I'm most proud of, because that move, hard as it was, led to every other good thing in my life, from the Fox 5 segments to I'm looking out of my window of palm trees, and not only graduating at the top of my class with honors, but getting to teach at my alma mater on and off as an adjunct for 10 years. So many good things and so many good friendships that would have been unavailable to me had I just stayed in Michigan doing what I was good at but didn't enjoy. So that was a pivotal decision, and one that even on the worst day ever, it didn't even occur to me to regret it. I just loved every minute of it.
Yeah, and I do remember September 11 very vividly as well, because August of that year is when I graduated from college. And then I remember going back to the marketplace looking for a job was a very tough thing to do, because everybody was just panicking what to do, right? And the country just kind of went bizarre.
Yeah, we were so disoriented from that.
Most certainly, yeah, for sure. Well, obviously, you've gone through a lot, and now you're here, and you have a lot of successful stories to tell. But what exactly is your why behind what you do? What kind of motivates you and keeps your drive?
It goes back to something that a coaching client and I were discussing recently, and she said something to the effect of, well, I guess, thriving's pretty important. And I said, and I used your name, I won't use it on here, but I said, I'll say, Ginas, thriving is everything. And, I don't want to get on a deep end here, but there's a saying from St. Irenaeus I've always liked: the glory of God is a human being fully alive. There are not enough people who are fully alive, especially in organizations. They're going to work, they're not engaged. If I can reach the leaders, help them thrive, I think they will naturally create thriving organizations, and they'll want their people to experience what they do. Because, if you and I are working together, I can't thrive unless you are. But if I can get to those leaders so that they can influence the people on their teams, we can make the place where we spend the most of our waking hours something that is just, life-giving and meaningful and a source of pride and passion and joy. So, yeah, it's just thriving is everything. That's how I would sum it up.
That describes your company name.
Yeah, Thriving Cultures. That's right. But you know what, Samuel? I discovered something just recently. It finally dawned on me, and I knew this on some level, but it became crystal clear. Thriving cultures start with thriving leaders. Mm-hmm. You want your culture to thrive, start thriving yourself. And it's easier said than done, but I think it's worth I think it's more than worth the effort. I don't know. It's like, what else is there?
Yeah, which kind of is a good segue into our next topic, which basically is about the management and leadership, because everybody aspired to be a leader, right? And sometimes we don't want the responsibility, but we like the title. But we don't necessarily know, right? Because there's a clear distinction between a manager and a leader. Maybe that's something you can probably help make our audience understand a little bit, because I know people kind of get the two confused. If you're just going to be in a manager role, that you're kind of a leader, but you are a leader even if you are on a bottom pole, right? Like you could still be leading people. So if you want to make that distinction, that would be helpful.
Okay, sure. The distinction, the way I see it, the way someone explained it to me long ago, and it made sense, leadership sets the vision and management carries it out. Now, it's not quite that black and white, but that's kind of the gist of it. But I completely agree with what you said about we're all leaders in some way. And I don't look at that as something as a nice to have. I look at personal leadership at every level as a necessity. Even if you're just leading your own life, leading your own, you're managing your own time and projects and the quality of your work and the timeliness and your interactions with other people, you're a leader. You're leading. And everybody can and should take the initiative that is theirs. That's another way to create a thriving organization. But does that distinction help?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I've heard someone else say is, I don't know if you know of Craig Rochelle, he's written a lot of books on leadership. One of the ways that he described his leadership is influence. So anybody who has influence, which almost anyone, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be with a title on your resume or whatever, right? On your business card. Because anybody can have that leadership because they're influencing someone else, whether it be someone below them or even, basically horizontal or vertical, right? So basically that, from that perspective, everyone has leadership role, but it's really how they, how they live that out is ultimately what matters. So, which brings me to the question about culture, because I think, leadership really, like you said, has a big impact on how a company culture really comes about. And oftentimes I've heard people say, if you don't create the culture, the culture just kind of form internally and you're going to have to live with it. But it's better that you control and build the culture that you want to create, right? And you want to be as influential in that process. So talk to us a little bit about how does a leadership play a part in creating that culture, especially that thriving culture that you described?
Okay, I think it starts with having a shared vision. More than shared workspace. If you have to choose between a shared workspace, which a lot of people are kind of clinging to or saying we got to get back to that, or a shared vision, choose the shared vision. That's number one. But number two, do not assume that everybody knows what that vision is or that they care. And that's why I developed the course I did to take leaders to take leaders through a process wherein they can take their people through the process of determining what business are we in. And I use the example of Nike. Nike's not in the shoe business. They're in the business of inspiring the athlete in all of us. So that allows them to do clothing and podcasts, all kinds of things that are not, outside the shoebox. But it starts with a shared vision. I cringe when I see companies focusing on, take your pet to work day and, crazy hair day or whatever. Nothing wrong with having fun, but it's got to tie back to the vision. If that's not strong, I had an old boss who used to say, entrepreneur through and through, and he used to say, yeah, we're a great place to work, but we're not Disney. Like we got to stay focused on the mission and on the vision. But if you can get people's hearts invested in that mission, they will come and bring their A game every day and look forward to it. Another key component of creating that great culture, very simple, but not always done. Hire people you trust, and then trust them. Trust them to get their work done the way they, work the way they want to. Because if you look at high performers, Samuel, the thing they have in common is they all want flexibility and autonomy. Mm-hmm. And I think the leader's job is to hire people who can be trusted with those things and then trust them. So that's a little of my perspective. I'd love to hear yours because I know that, you're running a company too, and you talk to a lot of folks. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you succinctly explain what basically the function of that leader is in terms of creating the culture, right? And I think it also comes down to like facilitating, right? Like the best talent to really shine and grow within that organization, giving them the opportunity. Like you said, if you are a dictatorship, people are going to react to that, right? But if you are in a culture of nurturing and building, right, that they're going to feel comfortable, they're going to feel valued and trusted, and they are going to live out that, and also believing in the best in people and telling them they can be better than who they are, and then that actually increases their trust in themselves and will do anything they can to add more value to the company, and ultimately that benefits the company, and it also helps the person in terms of their personal journey in whatever role.
Well, and I agree with that, and something I learned early on in grad school, which was kind of a no-brainer, but it speaks to what you just said, that the best parenting style, and I would say in the best leadership style, is to challenge people but also support them, as opposed to, and there are leaders out there who are just my way or the highway, and it's all about me, and I'm the Pied Piper, and that doesn't go so well. And so I think another key aspect here for people listening is, if you don't know your leadership style, take some time to identify it. Look through the 8 or 9 most popular styles, whether it's, participative, which I think is my leadership style. There's servant leadership. There are all kinds. Some are more effective than others. But yeah, the visionary leader sees something not only in the company, but yes, as you said, in the people, pushes them a little bit beyond their comfort zone, and they go, yeah, I can do that. And think about the best teacher you ever had. It probably wasn't the one who was most lenient. It was probably the one who said, you can do better. Yeah, and it's the same in companies.
What practical recommendations do you have for someone to actually do that leadership assessment? Is there any resource or tool that you may have on your side or somewhere else?
Yeah, I have on my blog a post that's in the last couple of months. It's May now, so probably in like March or April, that talked about, I think it was the 9 leadership styles. And my blog posts are categorized. So if you just click on the leadership tab, should be fairly easy to pull up. And I think as someone reads through those, they'll know almost intuitively, yeah, that's me, or, well, I've been this, but I'd like to lean more toward, again, say the servant leadership style or participative or whatever the case may be. But own that leadership identity and think about, how is this going to go over with the people I'm trying to get to do what needs to be done.
The link will be in the show note, but in case someone couldn't get it, GinaDeLapa.com, right? That's where they can go to the, okay.
Yep, blog.
And obviously you touch on just kind of the leadership and having that, just doing self-assessment of seeing who you are, and then that actually helps you lead people better. But also, going back to what you were talking about, just personal development, right? Because leadership is something, it's not just innate. Yeah, I would say some of it is innate, right? It comes natural for some people, but it also can be developed. So talk a little bit about what are some practical advice you have for someone who might just be starting as a new employee today and aspiring to be somebody sometime in the future, or they're kind of thrown into the fire. Now you got to lead, right? Sometimes you have to lead the organization. You told me a story of how someone became a president in a university, that you're a counselor, right? And that person became a leader and didn't even know how to speak to the crowd. So
between us, but yeah. Yeah.
So, but there are practical ways you can improve your leadership skills. So talk a little bit about what are some of the things that leaders can do.
Well, let's talk about new leaders, because they're the ones who are really thrown into the fire. And the challenge there is they're often not given the resources to step into that role with confidence. And so when they don't have confidence in the new role, they almost subconsciously cling to the old one because they were good at it. It's kind of like, it's like going from high school to college. It's a big leap. And so recognize that to succeed in your new role, you may need a whole new skill set. And that's okay. You're up for the task, but go get yourself some resources, whether it's joining a peer group or a mentor, or do what it takes. Put together your own kind of personal and professional development plan. Where I see leaders struggle the most in that transition is when they say, no, I don't need any help. Yeah, you do. You need public speaking help. You need to know how to run a meeting. You need to realize that you're in a fishbowl now, and your people are not going to respond to you unless you own that leadership role. And I think the last thing I would say on that is you have to understand that if you want your people to perform here, you've got to be up here, because the people who report to you are always going to be, or often going to be, one level removed. So, if you want your people to be excellent, you've got to be exemplary. If you want them to be pretty good, you got to be excellent, etc. But you've got to give them something to aspire to.
Which basically you're saying the responsibility is on you, and it's a reflection of you as a leader if your people below you, right, is not performing at their optimal level. So look at yourself and see what can you do to improve your skill, which brings me to the personal development aspect of it. I know you have a lot of resources for leaders today, or even some aspiring to be leaders, but what are some practical ways leaders can invest into improving their leadership skills in terms of growing in that their ability to lead?
Well, you touched on one earlier. Honestly, I think getting comfortable with public speaking will make you much more confident and credible, much more of a natural leader. I would, start there. Figure out your own learning style. Some people love to read, some people can't stand to read, but whether it's listening to podcasts, I listen to something on YouTube every day that's instructional or inspirational to stay fresh. But I had a boss years ago who said something that I think will apply here to aspiring leaders. Get beyond these four walls. Go talk to people who don't think like you or look like you or, live in your neighborhood. Expand your horizons and be willing to learn as much from other people as, you're teaching yourself. Keep track of what life teaches you. And that was the basis of my books. It was just things that I had learned over the years and developed into a way that other people could relate to them as well. The learning, it never ends. And, life would be pretty dull if it did.
Yeah. Some of my favorites are John Maxwell, Patrick Lencioni. I think even all those guys have amazing books on leadership, and just podcasts or even just listening to some of those books give you a whole lot of insights on leadership. Which brings me to a question about empathy, because I know right now everybody wants flexibility at workplace and, working remote, don't have the personal touch, right? The interactions as much as you would if you were actually physically present in the same office. So what can especially leaders do, leading with empathy, really understanding the need of the people and to make sure that they're serving them, right? You also touched on the kind of leadership style of servant leadership. What are some practical ways they can be more empathetic and be more showing kindness and gentleness to their subordinates.
There's a statement I read years ago by Nathaniel Branden that passed away a few years ago, but he wrote a lot of books about self-esteem. He was kind of in the company of Warren Bennis and some other big names in the leadership field. He said this: empathy has its roots in self-awareness. So if you want to be more empathic, start with yourself. Don't end there, but tune into your own needs for self-care and rest and renewal and all of that, and you'll be much more willing to hear about the struggles of other people without trying to just diminish those struggles or, turn a blind eye, etc. Be willing to share some of your struggles. Now, it doesn't mean as a leader that you're going to spill your guts, and it's a fine line, but don't use your people as a sounding board, or therapy. Go outsource that. You can get that online if you want to. But take exceptionally good care of yourself, and then be willing to ask your staff the hard questions. And I don't mean just in a group setting where people aren't as likely to speak up, but one-on-one. What's working well? How is your energy level? What else do you need to do your job well? What else would be helpful for me to know? I used to ask that when I taught grad school. I would at the beginning of the semester, what are 3 things that would be helpful for me to know about you? And people could say, and I would give my own examples so they kind of knew the scope of what to include. Some people would say silly things. Some people would say very profound things, but it gave the leader a little more context as to, this person has a dying relative or whatever the case is, so that they could be a little more understanding. And then it's the last thing I would say, appreciate your team more than you think is necessary. If you think you're praising them too much, you're probably doing the right amount. As you said, when people are disconnected from the team and the leadership and all of that, they need more reinforcement. But again, it starts with our own self-awareness.
Yeah, one thought I have is, obviously, we touched on empathy, and oftentimes it can get confused for just enabling someone, right? Instead of challenging them to be better, to try harder, do whatever those things are, to be the best they can. So where is that fine balance of just being kind and gentle versus empathetic, but also yet challenging enough to get that person to get out of their comfort zone and actually do what's needed to grow?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because there do have to be limits to this, or it does become coddling, and that should not be the leader's role. There are still metrics to meet, and there are still, standards to uphold. Clarifying what those are and saying, where do you see the most trouble reaching these? I mean, if you're having an employee who's struggling to meet those certain benchmarks, et cetera, some deadlines and things, some things can be negotiated, but yeah, I mean, that's why leaders get paid more, because they've got to uphold those standards and build in accountability. And the leader's job is not to do the work for the person. Don't let someone manage up. Help them own it. Find out, what's holding you back. How can I help? But how can I help is not the same as how can I do it for you? You see what I'm saying? You've got to lead and coach in a way that is going to encourage that person to use their strengths, not, stop trying, I guess.
Well, obviously, one thing the leaders and managers and entrepreneurs all have in common is not having enough time. So obviously, you are a big on productivity hacks, and you have apps and things that you're using to stay productive. So what advice do you have? And also, if there's any hacks that you can share with our audience as well, in terms of what you do to get what most important things that you have to get done.
Well, okay, yes, we could do a whole podcast on that topic alone, but and I'm sure we could fill the time nicely. But getting organized is extremely important for me, and it's something I'm always working at. But productivity hacks for me, I use an app called Things 3. I have to pay for it, but it's worth it because I have it on all my devices, and I keep lists constantly. Coming up with systems for how to get repetitive work done, whether it's writing a blog post or doing a podcast, whatever it is, so that you're not constantly reinventing the wheel. Something I'm a big proponent of as well is working 1 or 2 steps ahead. So for example, before I got dressed and all of that to get ready for today's podcast, I set up the studio. I checked the framing of the shot. I got a glass of water so that I wouldn't be, parched. I had the lights on. I had everything set up so that once I was ready, it was a matter of just gliding in, and here we are. And I can just focus on the task at hand, the conversation at hand. There are all kinds of ways to do that. I think we've talked on LinkedIn about, setting out your clothes the night before. These are teeny tiny things, but the success of the day is built on, you don't want to miss an important meeting because you couldn't find your socks. Mm-hmm. Prepare ahead, if you want to drink 10 glasses of water a day, then you got to do something the night before to make sure it's going to happen. Again, these are little things, but you see people flubbing on these little details all the time. So yeah, work 1 step ahead. And I guess the last thing I would say, digitize as much as possible. It's a process I recently started, digitizing all my notes. So I take it on an iPad, not paper, because paper's messy. And when your office is a mess, it's hard to think clearly. So just work at it every single day, chip away at it. And and you will see dramatic improvement as the years go by.
Yeah, and I think it's also kind of prioritizing the important versus sometimes the urgent that comes in the way as well, right? Because having an organized system to make sure your important things are marked out and then make room for the urgent within your schedule. So if there was ever an urgent, you do have the margin within your schedule to be able to address that as well. And I like what you said about preparation, but also perspiration, because I think oftentimes people look at successful people and think like, well, how do they do it? But there's a lot of preparation that went into that, sometimes years and years, a lot of perspiration, a lot of hard efforts. So I know Instagrams and LinkedIn can make it easy for someone else to just look at somebody's success and their following and their amount of comments, but that just didn't come overnight, right? And I think just being patient with yourself and also just sticking to the rules of, hey, if I'm going to want to create an audience or I want to increase my leadership skills or whatever those things are, it is not going to be overnight success. You got to invest in yourself and continue to exercise at those skills.
And along those lines, I heard a quote recently. I don't know if I'll get it exactly, but something like, don't compare your struggles with like someone else's highlight reel. Like when you look on Instagram and LinkedIn, everyone's putting out the snippets of their greatest hits. They don't show you the 98 times that didn't go or that kind of thing. Or as an example, when I'm on, Fox 5, people say, oh, you look so natural and relaxed. They don't see the list of things I do ahead, or the fact that for the first several years of doing that, I would be a nervous wreck beforehand, but that you use that nervousness to channel you to prepare so that when the time actually comes, you can forget all of that and just be present. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you're right. Success is never what it looks like on the surface.
Well, certainly not. Well, obviously, if you are a coach, you provide a lot of consulting and coaching for a lot of entrepreneurs and leaders and aspiring leaders. What advice would you give your younger self, knowing what you know today?
Good question. I would probably tell my younger self, trust yourself. Because when you're saying, is it my imagination or blah, 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 it's usually not your imagination. There's a tendency, I won't say we all have it, but to second guess ourselves. And I know I'm not the only one, but I don't want to pretend everyone has that either. Maybe they don't. But when in doubt, trust yourself and trust what you know. I think one thing I'm very glad that I did and have done since my early 20s is keep track of what life has taught me. I don't like having to learn things twice if I don't have to. So, and what you learn over the years is going to change and grow, of course, and get deeper and so forth. But yeah, most people are going to look back and go, yeah, I kind of should have done such and such back then. So don't wait. Don't wait for the perfect time. Whatever you're going to do, start doing it now.
Yeah, like you said, if you've already made that mistake in the past, why try to repeat it, right? And part of the same reason why I encourage people to read books or even listen to audibles or podcasts or whatever is someone who's probably 25 years of experience, they poured it into about 150 pages.
Exactly.
And they're telling you what you can do to avoid the same mistakes or to excel in whatever the role or whatever endeavor that you might have. So pay the $15 or $20 and buy that book because it's going to shortcut your path to success.
Completely.
Yeah, and I couldn't encourage that. I wish I had learned some of those in college days, that if the professors could encourage you to read it for the real reason as opposed to the assignments, I wish, I would have been in a much better place. But I think our education system needs to do a better job in encouraging the younger generation on why they should invest in learning, not as an exercise to just pass the grade or get a job. It's more so for even just personal development.
Right. And if anyone's listening who is still in college, or if maybe you've got kids who are in that age range, remind them that the real fun of learning begins sometimes after college. I didn't exactly love undergrad. I didn't know how to study and didn't know that I didn't know. And I would sit through lectures sometimes seeing people taking notes dutifully, and I would think, you can't possibly find this interesting. I would write in my journal or just daydream. But here's what, after I graduated, I realized I would start listening to audio cassette. Remember Nightingale Conant? Mm-hmm. I'm sure they're still around, but they were big in the cassette program. And I'm dating myself with cassettes, but I would listen to those incessantly, and I realized how hungry I was to learn. And I thought, I didn't realize in college how many ways there are to learn. So yeah, pick things that fit your learning style. I do love to read. I prefer to read things, though, that I've selected, not a professor. But yeah. For me, a book that had a big effect on me in my earlier in my career, The 7 Habits. 7 Habits of Highly People. That's a tough book to exhaust.
Yeah.
And, it got very popular, and I think anytime somebody becomes a guru, they become kind of a target. And Covey got
Covey's all books are pretty amazing.
They are. Putting first things first, that was another one. Mm-hmm. You spoke earlier about not overcrowding your schedule, and that was something that book, Putting First Things First, impressed upon me. It's not about filling every time slot on your day. It's about making sure the most important work gets done. And in fact, you're better served, especially as a leader, if you leave some spaces in your day to accommodate the unexpected opportunity or crisis.
Mm-hmm. Any parting wisdom for our audience?
Parting wisdom. Well, if you're going to become an entrepreneur, I would say leave good tracks with your former employer. Don't kind of take the attitude of, well, I just wrote them off or told. No, I mean, the world's a small place, so leave at your peak and leave on good terms. And then once you become an entrepreneur, or for anyone already in that space, just believe in yourself, even when no one else does. It was something Harvey Mackay said, but I believe it to be true. You're going to have a vision that other people may not see. Well, it wasn't given to them, but keep pursuing it. Keep surrounding yourself with people who are farther down the road than you are, and be a source of inspiration to other people. But who we associate with has much to do with, our own self-concept, our own conduct. So choose your company carefully, and be a source of encouragement to other people. Yeah.
Great wisdom. Well, Gina, I really enjoyed our conversation, and thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and time with us, and wish you all the best.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Samuel.
Thank you.
This episode of Coffee with Closers is brought to you by One IMS, a leading digital marketing agency helping businesses win new customers. To request a free marketing ROI audit, please visit oneims.com. If you enjoyed this video, please share it. To make sure you never miss an episode, please subscribe.